And I think we are, have a look if we are live. This meeting is being live streamed. Got it. I think we're being live streamed. Let me just double check on YouTube to your channel. Yes, we're on there. We're on there. Right then. So evening, everyone. We've had some technical issues. So we've gone from streaming on Facebook, on the PCP page, the education page, and YouTube. I'm really sorry. We've had lots of technical issues. We have to stream now just directly to YouTube. But tonight, guys, we've got fantastic guests with us. We've all been excited for this for a long time. One of our guests you have seen before, he's done a lot of shows with us, a lot of interviews. I actually think Richard was the first person we ever interviewed live on social media. So that was our first ever interview. So tonight, everyone, we've got Richard Lucas, who is the leader of the Scottish Family Party. And with Richard, we have Stef, aka the Glasgow Cabbie. Welcome both.
Thank you, Kim.
So guys, if you'd like to just introduce yourselves first, because to our viewers, some people might not know who you are. So Richard, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so leader of the Scottish Family Party. That's a new political party in Scotland. We started that just sort of 4 or 5 years ago. One of our big issues is the sex education situation. I mean, is it worse in Scotland or is it worse in Wales? We're not quite sure, but it's certainly really bad in both. So that's a major issue for us. We've been campaigning on that, trying to push it up the agenda. Bit about me, my background. I used to be a teacher until 4 years ago, but I was either going to be fired or struck off because my views didn't quite fit with the Scottish teaching profession. So now I'm doing something completely different, working with the family party full time. And a big part of what we do is campaigning on this crucial issue of the corruption of children.
And Stef?
Hi, Kim. My name's Stephen Shaw, better known as Stef Shaw. I drive a Glasgow taxi and I write under the name of Glasgow Cabbie, as you had previously said. I became involved in campaigning and suicide prevention. It all began through my poetry, which became quite well known in Glasgow and across Scotland, which led to fundraising prior to campaigning in Glasgow. My work became pretty well known and it led to where we are today and me becoming political really for the first time in my life. Nicola Sturgeon was actually the first person to put me in television back around 6 years ago when I met her at an opening of the Art Village in Shawlands. She was nothing but complimentary and extremely nice with regards to my poetry. But over the past few years, I've looked closely at Nicola and the SNP, and I'm absolutely disgusted with the state Scotland is in, and even more disgusted, if that's possible, at the vile, explicit and sordid sex education that's taking place. I originally came to know of Richard a couple of years ago, I think it was. I'm not good with times, but I came across a link that showed Richard at a meeting in Perth with one of his colleagues, taking up a challenge with John Swinney. And Richard challenged him very well on the sex education that's in Scottish schools. And the particular thing that caught my attention was the banana and Nutella, and why Richard was treated the way he was on that date in that meeting with adults that didn't want him speaking about sex education, the very sex education that they're speaking to children about in schools, but it wasn't good for adults, and I found that hard to swallow. I first posted it then, I posted the link, and it caused real upset in my Facebook page. But a lot of other issues came forward, and I was still campaigning on other fronts until before Christmas, when I decided to take up the challenge through the vile sex surveys. And I contacted Richard to see if he was interested in joining me in a demonstration. So that was my first contact really ever with this gentleman.
And I think that's the first time I came across you, was when you had come across the sex survey. You did the protest outside the police station. That's when I first come across you, Stef. We here in Wales, we've tried to keep a really good relationship going with the Scots. We've travelled up a few times. We've come to your house, Richard, for a cup of tea. And it's really important to us, this relationship, simply because of the connections. Do you know who wrote your curriculum of excellence, Richard?
Sorry, do what, sorry?
Do you know who wrote the curriculum of excellence for Scotland?
Curriculum for excellence. But it was a team of people, but have you got someone in particular in mind?
Yeah, well, this is it. Professor Donaldson.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a connection there with our curriculum, your curriculum. We do know all 4 UK governments signed up to comprehensive sexuality education at the same time. Our former education minister has referenced your curriculum. So this is why it's really important. So the chance, well, also as well, I actually filmed myself going onto the UNESCO website, looking at the Welsh documents, and it took me straight to Scotland's lesson resources. So I've shared that video on social media showing people, but now they've changed it from Scotland to Spain. Can you explain a little bit about the lesson content so people understand why I feel that's really important for them to know about?
Yeah. I mean, just before I do that, just to say, I mean, you're absolutely right that a lot of this, it comes to the United Nations and its agencies. So it's a worldwide problem. And the UK governments just seem to say, whatever the United Nations says, okay, we'll do it. It's like they haven't got a mind of their own. Just do as they're told. But in Scotland, where do we start? How long have we got? I mean, a nursery, right from nursery, they're basically deliberately undermining the sort of ideal of natural family, I would say, from the very beginning. Then as soon as they're in primary school, they're getting how to make a baby. They're getting like LGBT content at that age. It's completely inappropriate. You get the transgender messages. You know, it's up to you to decide if you're a boy or a girl. By the time they're higher up in primary school, I mean, really explicit, this is how you have sex. And this is what it feels like type messages. Just last week, there was a story in the papers here where a pupil in a primary school was sexually assaulted in the toilets immediately after a sex education lesson. And it's not surprising. It's just what you'd expect. Then, I mean, into high school, it's appalling. Pornography is endorsed, sexual promiscuity, any and every sexual practice is equal. They're up into the sixth form. I mean, what is the left? How could it get worse? Just the materials has become even more vulgar. And some of the sexual practices discussed, I wouldn't even want to talk about them. One of them I'd never even heard of myself. I'd have been quite happy to go through my whole life not knowing that was something that people ever did. But the Scottish government thinks that's what children need to learn about at school.
Yeah, right. So we get told that this education is to safeguard children and protect them from what they can access on the internet, i.e. pornography. And you've said that they promote pornography there. These are the screenshots that we carry, Richard. We've taken the screenshots from the Scottish Family Party, the RSHP website, the Scottish Government website. We've taken those screenshots from the slides, and that's what we carry around with us. I don't know if you know, we were on the Jeremy Vine show the other day, and there was a lady on there called Susan. She came on. She was the last person on. She wasn't allowed to discuss the lesson content from Scotland. She was only allowed to say it includes all orifices. Again, the transgender message, that's really strong up in Scotland. What we discovered in July 2020, and this was from the Scottish Times, that transgender intervention for 4-year-olds had increased by 80%. Now, this was, like I said, 2020. You'd been having this education around about 2 years at that point. Now we've got 16-year-olds, so under 16-year-olds in Scotland, transgender intervention for them has increased by over 1,500%. What's the feeling like up there, Richard? What are the parents and what are the teachers saying?
Well, you heard a bit of that, haven't you?
There's a lot of bitterness, Kim. My Facebook page is bursting at the seams with complaints, people supporting myself and Richard and other groups, parents groups and the like. But there is real concern and bitterness over the Scottish Government's sex education and what's happening at schools. I personally have had a real go at the Scottish Government on the fact they're asking children of 14 and 15 years of age how many sexual partners they've had and if they've ever indulged in anal sex. I find that deeply offensive to ask 14 and 15-year-olds. And in fact, if you were to come with me into Glasgow city centre and we were to put those questions to children of that age, I can assure you they would be arrested and charged with sexual abuse of children in Scotland. That's how bad it is. So if it's not okay for us to ask that question from the Scottish Government survey, it shouldn't be okay for schools to ask that question. Nicola Sturgeon had stated that these surveys would be anonymous. They're not. The Scottish Government ask children for their Scottish candidate numbers, which is their educational identification number. So that's a real problem in itself, because if banks have been hacked and military bases have been hacked by experts that can get into computer files, then what's to stop paedophiles hacking into school computers and the education system? Who is getting to see these answers that children are receiving, are giving, and the questions that they're receiving is deeply worrying. And I think we're all concerned here in Scotland, or certainly those of us who are aware of the surveys and the inappropriate sex education. Yeah,
that's it. Richard, you said that the education promotes pornography. I've looked at the slides and there was, as we all know, pornography is illegal. We know that. We also know this education is being promoted because it needs to protect children from pornography. But the slides and the videos I have seen has gone through the different types of pornography. And then there's a slide that says it's okay in moderation. Am I correct in saying that, or am I giving out misinformation when I say that?
Yeah, there's a slight change there. We used to say the resources promoted pornography. There was one video in particular they included that was just beyond the pale. It was utterly disgusting. And they've now removed that. The reason they've removed it, mind you, it's not because they came to the senses and thought, oh, this is actually wrong, let's change it. They removed it because the video actually isn't available on YouTube anymore. So they had to change it. So that video is gone. But we still say they endorse pornography. So for 12 to 15-year-olds, the message is like using pornography is perfectly normal, natural, and healthy. It's a perfectly normal thing to do. It explicitly says it's not something to feel guilty about. Whereas I believe, people do feel guilty when they look at pornography, because they should do, because they know it's wrong. Lots of people in the country, lots of parents think that's something that's wrong. It's just something that you shouldn't do. But the schools explicitly teach, no, it's not wrong. You just go ahead. Then having told them to go ahead when they're 12 to 15, then when they get older, that they start talking a bit, not enough, about some of the problems, about getting addicted to it or whatever. It's just completely contradictory. But they never, ever get the message or even hear the perspective. This is just something to avoid. This is just not something that's going to be a good thing for you in your life.
But talking of that same video, Richard, that is the video with the Nutella, the banana and Nutella. Am I right?
That's a different one. That one's still in there.
Oh, that one is still in there, is there?
That video is supposed to be making the point that sex in porn isn't realistic. But the message it basically gives is that, like, threesomes, anal sex, bondage, the message is that these are really popular, normal, and basically, hey, why don't you give it a go? They're all presenting a light-hearted, why not? This is just one of the many ways of having sex. I mean, I think bondage, I just think there's something wrong with that. That's a really distorted idea of sexuality. I don't want to make it illegal, but I just don't think that's a healthy sort of foundation for a good relationship. I think it's something, a bit distorted. But
So
in Scottish schools, it's just really light-hearted. There we are. There's something you can give a try if you want to.
I've looked at them myself, and we keep getting told it's age appropriate, but the only conclusion I can get from that is because it's animated. Does that make it age appropriate? Because it's all animated, it's all got music in the background. It's very appealing. Yeah.
But there's age appropriate, which is an important issue. Some of the sex education resources, that they're much too young. That's one issue. But sometimes the messages are wrong for any age. But I think if someone was saying to 30-year-olds, I think it's it's a really good idea to try bondage. That might spice up your relationship. I would say no, that's just bad advice. It doesn't matter what age they are. It's even worse in schools. But it's the wrong message, no matter what the age is, I think.
But what we're actually discussing here, we are actually discussing illegal activities.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah.
We are discussing illegal activity, It's illegal to view porn under the age of 18. It's illegal to have sex under the age of 16, but we're having these discussions in the classroom.
Yeah.
I had received a message from a lady who works with the government, and she's got a really responsible job with the government. And I hope any listeners can forgive me, because I'm going to use some explicit language here that was used. She had asked to see the DVD of what was being shown on video to her 10-year-old primary 6 son at school. And she looked, to her shock and horror, to children of that age being taught about, wanking and wet dreams. So appalled was this lady that she went back to the school. She looked at some of the teaching staff, and just they were embarrassed. And she used that language to them. And she said to them, "Why are you feeling awkward? Do you feel awkward at the fact you're teaching children and using that language to 10-year-old primary 6 pupils?" I think is utterly disgusting. And in fact, I keep saying this, I believe it to be illegal.
It is illegal.
It's downright filth. And I don't consider myself, I'm a father of 2. I don't consider myself, I'm from the East End of Glasgow, as any type of prudish guy. I'm not a prude. I'm a very worldly, thoughtful guy. And I just think what they're teaching at school is not actually teaching, but it is indoctrination of children. It's a scandal.
Absolutely. Go on, Richard.
What you're saying about the age of consent. In Scotland, the age of consent is really 13.
What?
But the law is 16. But the policy of the police, on the instruction of the government, is that no one gets prosecuted if they're 13 and above, unless the age gap's too big. So for like a couple of 13-year-olds or 13 and 16-year-olds, whatever, having sex, that's technically illegal. But they're taught at school that don't worry, nothing will happen. If you get caught, you won't be prosecuted, nothing will happen. In fact, they're taught at ages 12 to 15 that they've got a right to have illegal underage sex. I mean, I just wish I could get someone to come and debate this with me, someone to try and argue the case the way that children have a right to have illegal underage sex. But obviously, no one will come and debate it because it's indefensible. But that's what they're taught. That's what they're taught.
They're basically, Kim, asking children to incriminate themselves in law.
Yes.
They're asking children to mark down and be honest about their, sexual activity, when in fact it's against the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely inappropriate.
So this sex survey, where does this sex survey come from? Is this part of sex education, or is this something separate?
Yeah, it was from the government. So the government, fairly routinely, I think, it does a health and well-being survey when it asks pupils about, how much sport they do, what they eat and drink, how much sleep they get. It asks them to rate their parents. How good are the adults in your life at listening to you, this sort of thing, which is totally out of order as well. And this time they put some questions in about sexual activity, and they were extremely explicit and detailed. The problems are it just normalizes, it communicates an expectation that, we think you're probably doing these things, so we'll just ask you. And if anyone's there thinking, I've never done any of these things, they'll be thinking, I'm a bit of a weirdo here, aren't I? I assume everyone else is doing that. I'm the odd one out. But they just went ahead and asked them. Quite a few councils refused to do it, which was good. But a lot of councils did just go ahead.
Can I come in there, Richard? There was a total of 12 Scottish councils that completely rejected these health and wellbeing surveys. 10 had rejected them, and a further 2, I believe it was Moray and East Renfrewshire, who have amended the sexual content within the health and wellbeing surveys, which was good. They brought in some community questions. They were far more reasonable. So of the 32 councils in Scotland, a total of 12 councils, more than a third, rejected them. And that should sound alarm bells to every parent in this country.
I am so glad you mentioned the words health and wellbeing survey. We have recently found out that the same thing happened last July, but the health and wellbeing survey just had a single question about sex. So can you see where we're going here? It's the same, It's the same thing. But when we looked at our health and wellbeing survey, we couldn't find the questions, but we could find the reports and the results. And what I found really concerning was 75% of primary age children feel accepted amongst their peers anyway. And we know that 20% of children have got additional needs. So they're not really going to feel, they're obviously going to be feeling different. So we know that, those figures add up. We don't need to put in special measures for the certain proportion of children, because most of them do feel accepted unless they've got these additional needs. What was even more concerning, 85% of primary school children believe every word that teacher says.
That's sad and shocking.
So if we've got, I don't know, a geography teacher, somebody with a geography degree that has been given these surveys to give out to the children, how can they assess these surveys if they're appropriate or not when you're simply not qualified to deal with it, But I'm really glad you brought in the words health and well-being there, because this is what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with RSE and a mix of health and well-being, and these are the words just being drawn into our documents. And like I said, your survey is really bad. There are several questions on there that are shocking.
Yeah. Just on the survey as well, ditto in Scotland, the government deliberately kept it secret. But if you're doing a survey of all children, the obvious thing to do, you'd put it on your website, wouldn't you? Just so everyone could see it. Parents could see what it was. So parents were asked to, in some cases, consent or given the opportunity to withdraw them, but they weren't told what would be in the survey. So I've seen copies of it, but only because, you've got sort of insiders who are leaking it. They're trying to keep it secret. Just to add, sorry, some motorbikes go back. Just like you were saying, there's health and well-being, there's relationship, sex education. The other one of the trinity here is children's rights as well. Children's rights, that all sounds innocuous, but when you look at what they take it to mean, it often means the right to this sort of sex education, the right to explore their sexuality, the right to be able to ignore what their parents say and make their own decisions about things. So that's another big element in Scotland.
Well, yeah, this is something our government are keen to hide here as well, the sexual and reproductive rights of the child. We put it in our petition, our government removed it. We've seen it on some of your lesson slides now. It's being promoted in the classroom. Part of these children's sexual and reproductive rights mean the state can administer medication to our children as well. Now, we've seen this in the form of the morning after pill, taking children for abortions and things like that. This is really concerning when they're introducing baseless gender theories into the classroom. And we know this is gender theories and not gender reassignment, a protected characteristic, because the definitions clearly tell us it's gender identity. And this we're really close to a dangerous situation here. When you're looking at the children's sexual and reproductive rights, you're looking at what's promoted in this education, we're looking at the figures rising in Scotland. How long is it going to take before people actually stand up and realise what's going on here?
Yes, Kim, I'm with you in that. Just yesterday, Richard and I both shared a school teacher in Scotland in Dundee, a lady by the name of Heather McLean, of 40 odd years teaching experience, had written an article for a blog, and it was quite unbelievable. It was very detailed in how she felt about the sex education of primary school children. Richard's own Scottish Family Party Facebook page has had great interest in the teacher's blog or in the article. And there was over 2,000 shares on my Glasgow Cabbie Facebook page to this article, hundreds upon hundreds of comments in support of the teacher. But very sadly, the control levels here in Scotland are certainly against me over the past 6 months. Social media and Facebook means that an awful lot of my posts seem to disappear. And that very post left my page. I've reposted again, but the one with hundreds upon hundreds of comments, including Heather taking part in the debates on my page, sadly vanished.
I'm currently suffering restrictions on my account. You shared something from a 10-year-old's lesson the other day, and it was erections and penises. I shared that, and I am still restricted on my account because I'm sharing your post. It's absolutely ridiculous. They can censor us, but the children have access to pornography.
Was this one of my posts, Kim, can I ask?
Yes, it was one of your posts, and friends who had shared it from me, they didn't get no restrictions, but I have. I've gone against community standards for nudity.
It's unbelievable what's happening. The restrictions and the censorship that we're up against here.
I don't think people understand the magnitude of this. When I've recorded myself going onto the UNESCO website and it taking us to Scotland's lesson resources, that very same day I posted it on Facebook, I got banned, and UNESCO updated the website exactly the same day, 18th of March, and they changed it to Spanish. So is this a coincidence? Wow. I think not. People need to see this. Look, the level of deviance and the control of the information, even down to the lesson content, Richard, with the banana and Nutella. You surveyed the Scottish, you surveyed people. What was the results of that? And the media wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, we paid, £5,000 or something to get a professional opinion poll done, asking the Scottish population, a good sample, what they thought about different aspects of the sex education resources. And for a lot of the areas, people were dead against them. A really substantial majority saying that's not right. Other aspects, it was, that split three ways. A third thought it was okay, a third thought it was not okay, and a third didn't care. But the government looks at that and think, right, we don't care what people think. We're going with the views of the third. And as though they're the only people who exist in Scotland, as though they're the only types of parents. But the social media censorship is a big issue. Our family party page on Facebook at the moment, if you search for it, sometimes when people search for it, it just doesn't come up in the results. There's a page imitating us. There's a page against us. They come up, but the actual family party page won't come up. So I had people saying to me, how do you find your page on Facebook? And I think, for goodness sake, what's the matter with you? Just stick it in and search for it. But Facebook sometimes doesn't show it to people. Last year, during the election campaign, if you clicked to like our page on Facebook, a message came up saying, "Are you sure?"
It's It's absolutely unbelievable.
Which is a clear-cut case of a foreign corporation interfering in Scottish democracy, which is illegal. It's against the Electoral Commission rules. No one outside the UK is allowed to exert influence on our elections. So it's a perfectly clear-cut case. But you go to the Electoral Commission and they just say, oh, well, ho-hum, you know.
Yeah, they've done the same to me now, Richard. A couple of days before a demonstration, I get banned. I'm running in the council election on Thursday. I can't engage in groups. I can't engage in nothing, you know. They do it. You know, it is. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. The censorship is off the roof. But people need to realise that these discussions are around your child's education. I would be concerned if they were trying to censor my child's maths lessons, let alone the topic of sex. You know, when you paid £5,000 for that survey to find out what people thought of the sex education.
Yeah,
we had a consultation, and the first consultation, 87% of respondents didn't want RSE.
Right.
What do you think about that? What do you think about that? That was an official consultation. 87% rejected RSE as a
it's the same as Scotland. They just ignore. Them.
Yeah, the second consultation, they didn't include RSE, but 68% of respondents mentioned RSE. They didn't want it. They still went ahead as if we were all promoting it. You know that. Yeah. You know, so you can talk about foreign influences, which is illegal, but look at what the government's actually doing anyway when there is no influence. The documents aren't easy to read. They aren't easy to access online. We have to very often help people out doing it, you know. So it wasn't easy, and they've gone against it on a mass scale.
Yeah, but in Scotland, they do a consultation. It'll be the same in Wales. You get thousands and thousands of real people, if you like, saying, no, this is not what we want. And they ignore all that. But then there are so many charities, so-called, funded by the government, and they all say what the government wants to hear. Then the government thinks, well, all these thousands of normal people, what do they know?
Yeah.
You know, they're just amateurs. But these groups who we pay to tell us what we want to hear, they're the real experts. So we'll just listen to them instead. And that's just routine.
Yeah, that's exactly what goes on. You know, that's exactly what goes on. And this is what's happening here. It's less and less control. And also, by including all these other organisations and things like that, you haven't exactly got a person of responsibility then.
No.
You know, it's easier to pass the buck, and it's really hard then to pinpoint down some level of accountability.
Yeah. But they're basically, like with the transgender issue, they're listening to people who are more bothered about promoting their agenda than they are about kids' well-being.
Yes.
They don't really care about kids. They care about their message and their beliefs, and they want to persuade everyone to agree. And they want the children to agree as well. They want to bring up a new generation that completely agrees with them. And if, you know, a few hundred kids' lives get ruined in the process, well, they can live with that, as long as they get their way and everyone has to agree with them. It's scandalous.
It is scandalous, and I totally agree with you, Richard. You know, each to their own. I support anyone's right to be who they want to be or believe whatever they want to believe. But at the end of the day, when somebody comes along and says, hey, hang on, this is going to affect our child there, if you're still pushing forward for what you want, you're sick. You're a sick individual. Because if somebody said to me, hang on, what you're doing here now is actually going to harm this child, I'd be the first to throw in the towel. You know, we make sacrifices as adults, and there's not a lot of that going on around here. Everybody wants to shout and promote rights, but with rights come responsibility. Who's taking responsibility? Us, the everyday folk. You know, we are coming along. We are trying to accept responsibility for the mess the government is putting us in, but we're just being treated like we're nobody anyway.
Yes, for instance, here in Scotland, Kim, it was put to the First Minister in the Scottish Parliament if she felt awkward with these questions, or would she feel awkward with these questions, and she failed to even answer that question in itself. We found ourselves up against it, and the amount of restrictions we're receiving has made it extremely difficult. There has been some great positive news that just in the last week we've managed to raise over £7,000 in a crowdfunder an awful lot of people had asked me to previously, prior to becoming involved in this, I'd been a fundraiser for a number of different things. But a few people, including Richard, had asked me to look into possibly fundraising for billboards, posters, banners, maybe leaflets, to create more awareness, because there's an awful lot of people still don't know anything about this, and an awful lot don't believe you when you start to tell them what is going on. So on the positive front, we've managed to raise over £7,000, which is no mean feat in just over a week, which will go towards creating further awareness.
And that brings me to my next question. So what for you guys now moving forward? Because as it is up there, it's every single day children are being subjected to this. I've got 9 years experience now in comprehensive sexuality education. I've watched what's gone on in Scotland and England. Obviously, I'm heavily involved in Wales now. But in my opinion, Scotland is the worst right now. Where do you guys go from here?
Do you want to talk about that?
On you go, Richard.
We're having a protest in a couple of weeks outside Education Scotland's building in Glasgow. Education Scotland is like the government's education agency, but they're right behind all this stuff. The heart of it, they're all pulling in the same direction. So they're probably not expecting a crowd of people outside their offices protesting. One of the things we're doing for that is asking people to bring a teddy along so that they can, just to symbolize childhood innocence and just to remind them of what children actually are concerned about and what stage of development they're at when they're pushing all these messages at them. So we're trying to protest, just raise awareness. And this is a political party as well. And we were trying to reach more and more people with it. I mean, we had 84 candidates in the council election a couple of weeks ago in May. So we're just trying to grow and grow. And this is one of the issues that really, it sets people on fire a bit. I mean, people get enraged by it. People get really concerned about it. So they want to do something. They want to get involved. And that's ultimately, that's where the problem comes from. The problem comes from the government. And it comes from the fact that this is not treated as a political issue. But we think we've got to make it one. If the problem comes from the top, then that's where it's got to be challenged. That's what we're working on.
Same here. We're just going to challenge now as many levels of this as possible, from the teachers to the board of governors, the government, everybody. The way we see it is, look, you're either negligent or complicit at this stage. There's no in between, We're seeing what's going on around the place. How these people can sleep at night, I just do not know. Where is their moral compass? It's seems to be non-existent, But we need to write. This is a UK-wide problem, We can't get away from that. It's all well and good us blaming Drakeford and England blaming the Conservatives and you blaming the SNP, but isn't the fact that it's Labour, Conservatives and SNP, doesn't that make us all realise, hang on now, this is a wider agenda here. This is not just one government. This is not one school. This is not one set of lesson resource. We're all headed in the same place. We're in the same storm. We're just in different boats. And I think we've got our own little battles going on, But you know what? I think it's about time we all started working on the war now and united all the countries, because this is a war on our children. A line has been crossed. We've been far too tolerant for far too long. And it's about time we put a stop to it.
Yep, without a doubt, Kim. And I said in promoting this interview that I would touch briefly on some personal hell and trauma that I received in sexual abuse as a child. I was 9 years of age when a paedophile, a word that I had never known of at that time, it was never used at the time. Certainly, I'd never heard of it. I was only a child when my mother was in the hospital. And a man entered our family who was a vile and sick man. Thankfully, he's now dead. Children are safer. But, that traumatizes you for life. I can still remember clearly, and there was certain things and certain aspects that hurt me to this day. His name was Walter. That's as far as I'll go with it. So I don't want to hurt the people who brought him to the family. His name was Walter, and I grew to detest anybody at that point in time by the name of Walter. I mean, how ridiculous. I am aware of that now. But, you know, he looked like a TV presenter, and the TV presenter was another chap that I grew to detest only because he looked like Walter. These prejudices can strike you all because of the sickness of one person. But we do know there's a lot of them out there. But just to state to you, you know, that I myself am a survivor of paedophilia and how it damages you for your entire life. And it's part of my fight, along with Richard and all of our wonderful campaigners, to speak about it, because it can be very damaging mentally. Don't be afraid to speak to loved ones or anyone indeed about your trauma, because it can affect you for your entire lifetime.
And that's another thing that I want to speak about, Stef. For us, we have never ever, when you're looking at child sex abuse and things like that, you never ever see campaigns of prevention. It's always after the fact. You know, you see people fighting for justice, because there is none in this country. But our campaigns, our approach, for the first time in history, our campaigns against this sex education is actually more of a preventative model. And that's something we don't use experience, you know. We get the campaigns after the facts, and we campaign for justice and things like that. But what we are actually doing here, we are pushing preventative campaigns. And that's something children don't get very often. And that's why we have to keep going. That's why we have to continue, because this is the right way. Like you said, the trauma stays with you for life. We've got children being abused in school by other children after the sex education. We've got children being abused in school by teachers, which doesn't get talked about at all, because that doesn't come to light for decades after. There's a lot of damage going on in our systems and in our institutions as it is. This is going to add to that. And I think it's really important the way people are coming together now. So like I said, this is a preventative model. And like I keep saying as well, this can be our problem, or we can become their problem. And by speaking out and coming together and rising like this, we are becoming their problem. And then that brings me back to the censorship. Yes, it is a pain, this censorship is. But you know what? It's actually a compliment. It's a compliment, because you must be doing really good work for them to want to censor it. So although it's frustrating in one sense, in the other sense, it's a compliment. It proves that we are doing well. It proves we're getting far further than what they expect us to. And that's the reason to keep going. What do you think?
Very well said, Kim. And you spoke briefly about, you know, teachers and other people being involved in paedophilia. There was a recent case where a music teacher and a former policeman was imprisoned for, I think, 11 years in Glasgow for his part in abusing children at his school. Now, that comes from a teacher. And I've got family in education, but I was deeply ashamed of this particular teacher and former policeman. So this goes on at every walk of life, and we must be vigilant to it. We've got to be aware of our surroundings. We've got to educate our own children. Let's take the power away from teachers. This is a matter for adults, concerned adults and parents, guardians, the proper protectors of children, not teachers or the education department. It's not really their place to be getting in and teaching children or indoctrinating them in child sex. So I would urge all parents to become more vigilant of their surroundings and speak to their children about what's going on at school. It's highly important.
Yeah, it is highly important.
I mean, there's some people involved in Scottish education with some very unusual views. Let's put it that way. Like you've probably heard me say before about Colin Morrison, who they put in charge of sex education. He wrote about the need to break down the barrier between childhood and sexuality. and they put him in charge of sex education. A few years ago, they were paying this, it was a transgender person, in any case, he, she, whatever, was sort of dressing up as a dinosaur and teaching little kids about gender. And her promotional video had a model of a dinosaur on a pile of books. One of the books was called Harmful to Minors. So I looked it up on Amazon, and it was Harmful to Minors. It was about the dangers of basically insulating children from sexuality, the dangers of keeping sexuality away from children. That was a danger. You need to go there. I mean, there's other ones as well. John Heaney was a member of the Paedophile Information Exchange. He was very much involved in. And so this seen recently his obituary, a little like tribute to him is in the Gay Pride program for Edinburgh this time. I mean, the Paedophile Information Exchange is on the same family tree as the group that's called the Equality Network now. It's very influential in Scottish education. So there are people with these sort of views, these sort of agendas. And I think a lot of the politicians, they just don't realize it. They don't know what's going on, that they just get pulled along by these people without realizing.
Am I correct in saying, Richard, that this is a doctor, Colin Morrison?
Yeah.
That's the head of this education. And what was his quote? Can you recall?
He basically wrote saying that, we've created in society this artificial division between childhood and sexuality. And this is very damaging and unhealthy for children. So what we need to do is to break down this artificial barrier so children can explore their sexuality for themselves.
Despicable.
I mean, so I wrote to the Scottish government a while ago and said, right, this is what it says. Do you think he's fit for the job or not? And they replied, just say nothing. Say, no, he was chosen by a committee. We have people with all sorts of different opinions. It's a good thing to have a child sexuality advocate in the heart of your sex education program.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Educate and Celebrate. You got Peter Tatchell. He's written stuff with Tom O'Carroll. He's quoted Alfred Kinsey. It's and he's the one campaigning for us to remove our parental opt-out. Some of these people, we should be giving them jail time, not air time. But that's another show for another day, I think.
I mean, Peter Tatchell, you'll be aware of his letter to the Guardian. I can't remember when it was. Was it in the 80s? He wrote a letter to the Guardian saying that some 9-year-old boys have sex with adults and enjoy it. So what's the problem, basically? And that was
he says, sex with 9-year-old boys can be harmless. And funny enough, that was my first ever social media ban, was sharing that interview. And I was banned for adult sexual exploitation.
Yeah.
He was the one who got banned for children, but I was the one who got banned for the sexual exploitation.
Yeah. I know someone who was on a BBC show with Peter Tatchell once. And the BBC said to him before the show, they said, you are not allowed to bring up his letter about, 9-year-old boys having sex is fine. They said, you're not allowed to mention that. If you mention that, the show's over and you're off the show. Protecting.
This is it. This is wrong. This is what I'd say to the LGBT people out there. Who speaks for you? Who is talking your language? Is it us, or is it Peter Tatchell? You know what I mean? Common sense. That's all we're looking for here, is a bit of common sense. And when you look at it from a common sense perspective, you'll understand that this education is I can't call it education. You can't call it education. It's an insult, isn't it? This is a danger.
Yes.
This is a danger. This is the death of innocence. It's the mutilation of children, long-term damage to children. And I'm sick of people saying the teacher said. Well, Richard Lucas, you was the teacher. And what did the teacher say? What would you say to finish this show off now? We kept getting people come to us and say, well, the teacher said it's okay. Well, Richard, you was the teacher. What's the teacher going to say for us now?
Yeah, I think I would say to teachers, how are you going to respond to this? It's all very well to think, oh, it won't go down well. It won't be good for my career. But really, is that what comes first? Do you not have a duty, a responsibility to speak out? I mean, some teachers, they'll speak out in their school. What often happens though is that a teacher might look at this, they'll think, oh, I'm not teaching that, not on your life. And so they don't teach it. They say, I don't want to do that. I want to teach something else. But then who's left to teach it? the teachers who are left doing it are the ones who are thinking, oh, this is great. This is just what I wanted, the opportunity to promote all this stuff to children. That's why I came into teaching. And they're the ones who tend to do it.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. Well, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Now I'm going to close the show. Is there one final message you both want to put out to people, England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland?
Yes,
What's your message?
yes, Kim. I would love people to show real passion. This is the time for people to come together. Adults, guardians, and concerned adults from all over the UK. We really need to come together in this. We really need to put a stop to governments dictating exactly what our children are being taught. And we've got to show fervour and passion. We've got to come together. We've got to speak out as often as we are restricted. We've got to continue to come together and create a scene. Let's embarrass politicians. Let's embarrass teachers or anybody. Let's embarrass Police Scotland or the Metropolitan Police. Anyone who's unprepared to do anything about the indoctrination of children in our schools is then complicit in that teaching. And it's leaving us all very bitter. Come together and do something about it. That's my message.
Thank you.
Here. And keep up the good work in Wales. We keep an eye on what you're doing. We're right behind you.
Keep it going, Kim.
Guys. And what we'll do soon, we'll have to arrange a date. We'll fetch a big tribe up to support you, and then you can do the same for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most certainly.
That'd be great.
So to everyone watching tonight, I hope you enjoyed that. I was really excited for this interview. These guys are doing amazing up in Scotland. So if you're not following already, follow Scottish Family Party and the Glasgow Cabbie. So guys, well done on all the work you're doing. You really are doing fantastic. Like I always say, Scotland is close to my heart anyway. With Celts, we know we're going down the same road. We seem to be having a bit of a closer relationship with this education than with England, because our government wouldn't make us think we're at war with them all the time. You know, it's part of the play, isn't it? So yeah, I got faith in the Celts. I have got 100% faith in the Celts. I think we're going to do it. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I know it's definitely going to happen, and it's going to happen in Scotland because of you guys. It's going to happen in Wales because of us guys. So guys, share this out. I'm really sorry about the technical issues. Sorry we couldn't stream to all those platforms. To still get this shared out, the message is important. Show everyone what's going on around the UK. If you're in Scotland, you follow the guys here. Donate to raise awareness. If you're in Wales, please follow us. Donate for our judicial review. We're all desperately working as hard as we can here, and we've all got one common thing, and that is child safety and safeguarding. And if you don't stand for children, guys, you don't stand for much. Thank you all for watching. Sorry.
It's all for the children.
It's all for the children. Thank you all so much, everyone. Now, I don't know how I stop this. I don't know how to stop the... Is that it? I don't know how to stop the live. How do I stop the live?
Just close the whole window.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, bye, guys.